Dave awoke groggily at 11:45, Tony shaking him gently. "Dave, it's a quarter till. We've got a problem, too." That got Dave's attention. "What is it?" "We keep hearing voices from the main trail. Kids and grown-ups. A dog once. Rhonda has a radio. She's watching the way we came." "That's good," said Dave, lacing up his boots. "After I make radio contact, let's make sure the kids are ready to go quickly if we need to." Dave fished out his transceiver and listened at noon. "Got your message," was all the voice said. Then Dave heard the melody of Patsy Cline singing "Walking After Midnight." Dave smiled. He sure was. He listened to the song he liked so much and then repacked his radio. No brevity code, no alert song, no problems back home. After checking and repacking the ponchos, Dave explained that he was going to look for a better spot to camp further away from the trail, as hearing the traffic they were, even so little of it, was unnerving. He gave Tony a running password, and with his canteen attached to a belt loop via a carabiner, reapplied camouflage cream to his face and left the campsite. He moved easily through the light underbrush of the old home site. He passed the old foundation, the cut granite front step partially covered by a lilac bush, a remnant of forgotten dreams and ambitions. Places like this usually made Dave melancholy, as he remembered the farms of his youth now covered with asphalt, sod, and poorly constructed homes. He had no time for reminiscing now. He was all business as he moved as if he was back on point in the DMZ. Every step a potential tripwire, every movement a potential enemy. He continued for 20 minutes, finding a likely spot partially obscured by a large rock outcropping and a large patch of briars downslope from the old homestead. As he made his way back to the family, he heard voices, loud voices. It sounded like a large group of people out for a holiday or picnic. Dave hustled over to a fallen log and took a position behind it. He had a fair view of a clearing that Dave assumed was once a barnyard in better times. He saw them come into view one at a time. A dozen or more people, all carrying gaudily colored packs, reds, bright blue, several of fluorescent orange. Dave recognized the cut. All the packs were the finest quality and popular with the urban hiker. They were calling out to each other in voices that echoed throughout the forest. Dave cringed. He heard one call out, "Hey, how about we stop and have lunch here?" "Yeah, sounds good," called a voice from the front. The group met in the middle of the clearing, and Dave could see what they were armed. AR-15s with scopes, an H&K 91 or two, a couple of what looked like Benelli shotguns, nothing low cost or second string from a money standpoint. There were 8 men and male teenagers, all equipped with pistols and drop-leg holsters. The entire group dropped their packs, and a group of them started to noisily collect firewood. One had a small axe on his pack, a sleek affair with a black plastic handle. He started merrily hacking away at a nearby standing oak tree. Some of the women yelled to the men, "How about some rocks?" "Yeah, sure," rang a voice. Soon the group had a fire ring with the fire blazing in it, smoke curling lazily to the clear, crisp autumn sky. Dave had one thought. These idiots have a death wish. He remembered his friend Scott's stories from when he spent 3 months in Afghanistan fighting the Mujahideen against the Russians. Any sign of campfires were often bombed from the air indiscriminately. If the UN forces were actually looking for stragglers and refugees, they could conceivably drop in Gila-born troops to investigate, or set up blocking forces, or just bomb them, which Dave didn't think they would do. Yet, he watched as the group below him, who Dave had christened the Knuckleheads, started cooking a lunch. Freeze-dried ration packs soon littered the area as the Knuckleheads cast their trash aside with wild abandon. Dave could only shake his head as he watched a few of them construct a makeshift shelter for a latrine. One passed around a bottle of something Dave was sure wasn't medicinal. He watched one check what must have been a GPS receiver and discussed the readout with another. They were both pointing in opposite directions. Dave toyed with the idea of making contact with the clown circus, but decided against it. 6 extras were enough. These people had no small children and were making no attempt whatsoever at maintaining a tactical presence. He felt no real obligation to them. Dave slowly low-crawled away from the party and almost silently made his way back to his concerned wards. "Dave, what's going on?" asked a concerned Tony. "A group of folks bugging out. Look like big money idiots in the city. Think they can throw money at something and not need experience. I'd take you and your SKS over all them and $3,000 pre-bans any day." Dave looked around. "Call Rhonda. Let her know we're leaving. We'll recall her just when we're ready to go." Tony woke up the kids and they packed their kit quickly. One of the kids had to use the wood line, so to speak. After completing that, they called in Rhonda and rucked up. Dave led them downhill from the party. They were off trail and moved slowly and carefully, seeking stealth, not speed. Eventually, they broke for a breather. Tony looked up at the trees and said, "Dave, how about this spot?" Dave, sitting on his pack, drinking from his canteen, looked around and said, "Sure." They couldn't hear the Festival of Fools up the hill, and they were under decent cover. Dave told Rhonda and Tony that he would stand watch and they could feed the kids. Dave mentioned the S-bit stove they had captured from the Germans, and Tony smiled. "Hot stuff for lunch?" "Go ahead," said Dave. "Just no fun." Rhonda laughed. "Or you'll scalp us?" Dave grinned. "Yep." Dave took his pack a little ways uphill and laid it down. He took out the solar charger and placed it in a sunny spot. Laying behind the pack, he remained alert for unusual noises or out-of-place movement. He remained there for several hours, enjoying the solitude of the place and wishing he was home and that things were normal. Eventually, Tony came up to where he was. "Dave, you want a break?" "Sure, Tony," Dave whispered back. "How do you like the new rifle?" "It's nice. This thing probably costs more than my car." "Well, it's no good if you can't use it. Those idiots up there are going to get captured or killed. All the fancy crap in the world won't help them." Tony leaned into Dave. "How much longer do you figure?" Dave considered. 3 or 4 days, 5 at the most. We may be tight on food, but once we get there we can get a ride." "Where are you planning on going? Relatives or friends?" Tony looked away for a moment, then back at Dave. "No, we don't have anyone or anything to go to. We just knew they were coming for us, so we split. Kind of figured we'd wing it when we got there. Staying out of jail was the first thing we was worried about." Dave looked away. "Well, I can probably put you up for a bit and introduce you to a few folks. If you're as good a mechanic as you said the night I met you, you'll have plenty of work." Tony brightened. "That'd be great, Dave. That's really good of you to do that for me and the kids and Rhonda, but we still have to get there." Dave nodded. "There is that. Do you want to learn how to fuel strip your rifle?" "Sure." "Okay, first unload and clear it." Dave listened with rapt attention as Scott talked about the airstrike. "We were on a hillside," he said, his animated style of storytelling keeping all the eyes in the bar locked on him. "And we were hiding in this cave. Well, these idiots we were supposed to link up with were camped across the valley. We had met with them, but I didn't like the look of them. They had rusty rifles and smelled like hashish. So I told Amir Khan there was no way I was spending the night with those pirates. So we climbed up the mountain to a cave where we had kept the missiles. So here we are, sitting in this cave, shivering in the cold, and these doofuses have a big fire going like it's bonfire day at the beach. We're talking to ourselves about the mission. We were going to ambush a supply column coming to relieve the fort we had under siege, and we hear a jet, way up high, out of stinger range. Then we hear whistling go past. Waleed pushed me down, and then whoom! He yelled, splashing beer from his mug, his hands telling the story as much as his words. The whole freaking hillside across the valley goes up. Must have dropped a whole load from a Frogfoot, referring to the Soviet Su-25, loosely a copy of the venerable American A-10. We had stuff falling all over our mountain. His eyes got a faraway look. Body parts, rocks, what was left of an RPK-74, came down like rain. Everyone was quiet. Then he looked up. And the next night, the group I was with wanted to build a friggin' fire in the open. I said, "What, are you people nuts? Do you have any idea why why your pals across the valley got turned into martyr hamburger last night? And they just looked at me. Inshallah, they said. God's will. I told them God made them stupid, if that's how you feel. Half these guys are head and shoulders above any other guerrilla fighter in history. The rest are knuckleheads. 144% dumbass. The only thing is, they're beating the Russians. A blonde from campus spoke up. Why are the Russians losing? Two things, said Scott, giving her the once-over. Potential here, he thought. One, they're using draftees who don't want to be there and whose only goal is to survive their tour. The other is the Gannies are too stubborn to give up. While Dave's mind drifted, events were stirring elsewhere. Back in New Hampshire, his friends were listening to the radio. Most normal work was infrequent now, with society holding its breath. Even in New Hampshire, where the power came from one nuclear power plant and hydropower from Quebec, there was trouble supplying all the needs of industry. The pressure on the states that had declared themselves beyond the UN mandates and oppressive federal government was substantial. Governors were alternately threatened with prison and lengthy sentences and cajoled with empty promises of Senate seats and more power. Fortunately, real men and women of courage had emerged, as they often do in a crisis. Dave's own governor was an example of this. Once criticized for being wishy-washy on tough issues, he stood up to the federal government on TV and declared that he was not going to give up the citizens of New Hampshire and their God-given rights for all the power of God. I will no more sacrifice the precious liberty of the citizens of my state to the current regime in Washington than I would to hollow mandates from the United Nations. Their freedoms are not mine to sell for any price. My oath as governor stated quite clearly that my job is to protect the rights of the citizens. I have no power to abrogate those rights under any situation or circumstance. The United States government in Washington, D.C. has no more power to take away or curtail our rights to free travel, free association, or any other blessings of liberty recognized by our founding fathers than it does to sell oil rights on Mars. As of this morning, I have ordered the mobilization of the State Defense Force and the militia. Right now, we are calling for all male citizens between the ages of 17 and 62 to report to their town halls, police stations, fire stations, state police barracks, former National Guard armories, and other places to be announced locally for enlistment in militia companies. We would suggest that each person have at their disposal one firearm of military utility. Lists of equipment needed are being developed and will be sent to all towns in the state for dissemination. As of this moment, I am declaring this state a gun control-free state. No citizen of this state is subject to any federal firearms law. The General Assembly is right now passing a law invalidating all state laws concerning firearms. No peaceable person shall be debarred the right to keep and bear arms, period. Further, it has come to the attention of this office that there are a number of otherwise peaceable people trying to reach our fair state to take advantage of our freedoms. We welcome them with open arms. The representative of any agency interfering with the safe passage of a person across our borders will be dealt with in the harshest possible manner. I implore the President and our Congress in Washington, D.C. to expel the foreign troops, over 100,000 so far, that have invaded in our country. Return our government to a sound fiscal policy. Return us to our constitutional republic that we entrusted to you and you stole. We demand it. We will live that promise of freedom, whatever your mandates, whatever the price we must bear. Our license plates bear a motto, and we will follow that promise. Live free or die. And so we will. Good night, and may God bless the Republic and the great state of New Hampshire. Dave's group was in an uproar. Some wanted to launch attacks against the German troops in Massachusetts immediately. Some wanted to go to town and help organize the militia. We don't need them, stated Steve forcefully. With all the training we've done, we can operate independently. Taking on a bunch of amateurs will slow us down and compromise us. I vote for leaderless resistance. I disagree, said Jim. We need to develop an army with coordination of effort, decentralized for certain, but without coordination, all of our effort will be wasted, effort duplicated. No army has ever won a war without central leadership. Supply, communication, support we will need soon enough, and we can't do that alone. The debate continued well into the night. Eventually, they decided they would offer their services to the state, provided they could remain together as a unit. The first concern was to their families. They would go around and check to ensure that they had enough food and fuel to get through to spring. They needed to inventory food, medicines, fuel, lamp oil, female hygiene products, everything. Although individually against collectivism, they would redistribute what they had amongst themselves for the sake of their families. They had enough ammunition to fight the war alone, and the number of guns they owned between themselves would have given the UN weapons inspectors fits. But they were only 9, for now. With the night rested, well-fed, and ready, Dave and his charges left the shelter of the forest and again took to the trail. They made good time over the hilly terrain, as the trail was clear and the path well traveled. They proceeded up the spur trail and again headed north. They continued on this path for several hours, taking breaks as needed. The children were bearing the march well, again better than Dave had a right to expect. He hoped their fear of him didn't manifest itself into hate. But, he reasoned, they had parents that were, by all means, good and loving, and that went a long way too. Further than fear. They cleared the second large hill, not quite in the mountains yet, and out front, Dave saw something that made him stop in his tracks. A campfire, burning brightly in the saddle below him off to the right. Apparently there was a clearing there, and people were burning a fire, of all things. Dave would have bet it was the noisy clowns from the earlier afternoon. Dave decided to wait. He didn't want to detour, but he didn't want these rake amateurs to draw a fire too. He called the group over to him and laid it out. We can try to get past them quickly, or we can detour, but we'll have to cut pretty far out to get ahead of these folks. If we go past them, we'll need to push it 100% and still be as cautious as we can be. Rhonda and Tony looked at each other and nodded. We'll try to stay as fast as we can, Dave. All right, kids? A murmur from the children reinforced their father's words. Okay, let's make sure you kids stay with Mom and Dad. Tony, I'll have a radio, as will you and Rhonda. I'm going to go first. Don't try to keep up. When I get to the top of the next hill, I'm going to check it out, drop my pack, and come back for you guys to help. Sure, Dave. If anything happens, I'll call you. If it sounds like I've been taken out, we've been over the maps. You can go north. You can defend yourself. If I hear you in trouble, I'll come running. Don't be afraid to drop your packs and run. You can survive without your packs, so remember that. We will, said Rhonda emphatically. Drink a little water, go if you have to, and follow me. Dave set out at a quick pace, trying to make time without sacrificing stealth. He was sure he'd be up and back before the family reached the bottom of the saddle. As he progressed towards the branch trail, that must be there, for otherwise the clown posse wouldn't have made camp where they did. He slowed. He was glad he did, as he saw a lighter flare about 200 yards downhill from him. He dropped his ruck quietly and called Tony on the radio. Family Guy, it's Boone, he called. Go ahead, came the reply. I dropped my pack short of the saddle. Look for the luminous tape on the inside of the frame. It should be facing you as you come down the trail. There's someone down here. I'm going to check them out. Roger, Tony answered tersely. Dave entered stealth mode as he carefully made his way down the hill. He heard them talking long before he got there, 2 voices chatting in the dark. He cautiously made his way towards them and took cover behind a convenient boulder. Hey, he hissed. The voices stopped. Who's there? Called one. A friend, was Dave's answer. Well, come out if you're a friend. He heard one man trying to sneak around. Tell your pal to stop trying to circle me and come out in the open, and I will. How do we know we can trust you? Asked the disembodied voice. You don't, but if I wanted to, I could have opened up on you instead of hailing you, right? Replied Dave. The voice seemed to be considering it. All right, Mikey, come out and we'll see this guy. The voice called out after a minute. Dave heard Mikey breaking brush and saw him come out onto the trail below him. Dave took a deep breath and stood up. Over here, he called, his rifle pointing at them. Safety off, finger on the trigger. The 2 men had their weapons slung assault style, but the muzzles were pointed downwards as they approached him. Dave stepped towards them. "Who are you?" asked the voice in charge. "Just a wayward traveler like you." "Where are you headed?" "Past you. I just want to go to the top of the trail and no trouble." Silence. "We'll need to check and see what we're going to do with you," came the reply. "Okay," said Dave. "I'll wait here." The man spoke into a radio. "Yeah, he just wants to pass by, he says." "No, just a rifle. I'll see. Where's your pack, mister?" "I left it up on the trail." "He left it up on the trail. Okay, hold on. You military, pal? Boss wants to know." Dave answered, "I was once, but now I'm just a citizen who wants to go home." "Where are you from?" "New Hampshire." "Hold on. Boss, this is Roger. He says he's ex-military and going home to New Hampshire." I'll see." "Who were you with?" "I was with the 82nd Airborne, and tell your boss I'm getting tired of playing games. Either let me pass or fight." "No need to get testy," replied the man whose name was Roger. "Let me tell the boss." "No need," said a voice from behind him. Roger whirled. "Geez, don't sneak up on me like that." Ignoring Roger and Mikey, the boss walked straight up to Dave. "I'm in charge here. What is it you want?" "I want to pass here without your boys shooting at me." "You solo?" "Right now I am," said Dave, not wishing to expose his group just wrecked. "Roger says you were 82nd Airborne, that right?" "Yes," said Dave, his patience getting thin. "Infantry. Who the heck are you, and why are you blocking a public trail?" "We'll do what we have to protect ourselves. Look, if you're alone, you'll be safer in a group. Would you be interested in visiting with us? We could help you get north, and we could offer more protection than you have traveling alone." Dave answered quickly. "I'm only interested in passing here. What do you say?" "If you don't think we're good enough—" "I don't care if you were all ex-Delta," cut in Dave. "Can I pass or not?" "Well, sure, it's a free country." "I'm going to get my pack. I'll be right back," said Dave. He trotted up the path, radioed Tony quietly that he was coming towards him. He found the family crouched around his pack. "I'm going back down. I'll break squelch twice as a signal for you to come down the hill, okay?" "Okay," answered Tony. "I'll explain it all when I can," said Dave, "but for now I need to move." Dave returned carefully, but his caution was unnecessary. The three men were still in a cluster in the saddle. As Dave approached, the boss said, "What's your hurry? We have a lot to offer, and we're traveling in the daytime. It's a lot easier to see." To which Dave answered, "Are you going to let me pass?" "Well, yes, of course," said the boss, obviously put off by Dave's brusque manner. "I was just saying, well, I have a family with kids behind me. They're going to pass here," Dave broke squelch twice, "in a minute. Please don't disturb them." The boss sounded bewildered. "I thought you were alone." "I was," said Dave, "but you took so long jawing that they caught up with me. They're a little nervous, so just let them pass." Just then the footsteps of the family sounded on the trail. Watching the three men to ensure no moves were made for their weapons, Dave counted shapes in the dark. 3, 4, 5, 6. After waiting a moment in silence, Dave said, "Let's give them a few minutes and I'll fill you in on something." The boss shuffled on his feet. "I don't know who you are or why you're bugging out, but you clowns are going to get yourselves killed. You make too much noise when you travel. Your picnic this afternoon was a lesson in how to be found. If you are fugitives or escaping, you need to quit building fires, quit making noise, travel at night, and don't put your security in the middle of a trail." The boss sputtered, "You don't understand." "Oh, I understand all right. I watched you clowns at lunch, big fire, chopping down cheese, and tonight I could see your fire from a mile away up on the hill. It's like a beacon saying, 'Find me and kill me' to anyone in a 15-mile area. You better think if you want to survive. Good luck. You'll need it." And Dave turned and stalked off.